सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Welcome back to this session on the Bhagavad Gita. We completed the eighth adhyaya and had a look at some of the tricky verses. Let's spend a little time today trying to revise the eighth chapter, and then maybe we'll start off with the ninth one. Now, there have been a couple of comments. I had a huge discussion with my co-author, Dr. Sri Krishna, yesterday, and then even Dr. Raju sent me a couple of mails about the um two parts. So I thought it would be good to discuss, a couple of things that have been mentioned um, by both of them. See, first of all, this is a little, both tricky and also not the core idea of Gita, right? Many times we find the most profound and the most valuable portions are the ones which give us least trouble when it comes to understanding um, conceptually. It is the peripheral things that make that are create all the complications and confusions because I mean, whatever be the reason. But the core ideas of Gita are very clear, okay, in the text. Um, when we look at the commentators, when we look at the various people who interpret these verses, there is no confusion at all about that. It is only when it comes to things like Varna, when it comes to things like this two paths for a yogi, when it comes to certain practices, that is where a lot of discussion debate happening. Even if you see the first chapter with regard to all the rituals, post death rituals, there's so much of discussion. But when it comes to a verse like Uddhared Atman Atmanam Atmanam Avasadayet, you elevate yourself by your own efforts, don't put yourself down. There's no confusion at all. Everybody translated the same way. And that is far more important than so many of these verses. After a yogi dies, whether he attains the Swarga or whether he dies in Uttarayana, this is secondary. But unfortunately, this is where a lot of confusion is present, and we are trying to sort out some of these confusions. I'll just take so Dr. Raju had sent a message. Yeah. Yeah, so one aspect is which both of them told me was there's no difference between the verse 24 and 25 in terms of who it is referring to. Both of them are yogis. Now, I mentioned that in the 24th shloka, there's a special emphasis on Brahmavid. But in general, from the previous and the later verses, it's quite clear that any yogi who dies, they go through one of these two paths, and it is determined on what time of departure is there. Like I said, it's a metaphorical idea. So we'll go to that now. Just let's take a look at the summary of the chapter. Okay, some of the important things what are discussed in this chapter. About five ideas again given in Jivanatharma Yoga, which very nicely lists out the important topics. Right at the beginning, Arjuna asks Krishna a few questions about specific terminology, and Arjuna asks these questions. Krishna gives responses to each one of them. Then there is the discussion about the importance of the moment of death, or what happens at the final moment, and how the manner in which somebody has led a life that will reflect even in the final moments. Then he talks about Upasana and the Omkara denoting the Brahman and so on. Finally, adherence to karma with constant connect with Brahman. Finally, the two paths that are available for the Jiva, for a yogi especially. So, roughly, this is the two, these are the five topics that are covered in this chapter. Excuse me. Let's quickly run through the questions that Arjuna asked and the answers that Krishna gave for the first few things. So he opens with asking, Kim Tad Brahma? What is Brahma? What is Brahman? Earlier we have seen Brahmakshara Samudbhavam in the third chapter, Brahmarpanam Brahma Havihi, the fourth chapter, and so on. So what is Brahma? The answer Krishna gives is Aksharam Brahma Paramam. So Brahman is that which is Akshara, which cannot be destroyed, and Paramam, which is supreme, which is the all pervading. So Akshara is something which is indestructible, which is beyond the idea of space and time. The moment there is a space and time attached to anything, it becomes Kshara, it becomes material. But when there is no space and time attached to it, it means it goes beyond the boundaries, beyond the limitations of space and time. That's why you have Anoraniyan, Mahato Mahiyan, Vyaktoyam Achintyoyam, Avikaryoyam Uchate. These kind of, we have seen all this, right? So that is the nature of the Brahma. It is indestructible, it is supreme. He says, Kim Adhyatmam. What is Adhyatma? And Krishna says, Swabhavo Adhyatma Uchate. Swabhava Adhyatma Uchate. So human nature in its entire structure is called Adhyatma. So human is a sum total of his body, his senses, sense organs, mind, intellect, ego, Atma, all the thing together, the entire what represents an individual that can collectively be called as Adhyatma, he says. Kim karma, what is karma? And he says, Bhuta bhavod bhavakaro visargaha karma sanyitaha. So, karma is a sum total of all the different activities done by different people, by all the beings for related to Srishti, creation, sthiti, sustenance, and laya, dissolution. So, related to all this, we have karma. Adibhutam chakim. What is Adibhutam? He says, Adibhutam ksharo bhavaha. So, all destructible things in this world are Adibhuta, the material world. So, material world, everything in the material world has a beginning, has an end, right? So, that is what is Adibhuta. Adidaivam kimuchyate. What is called Adidaiva? So, there he says, Purushahasa Adidaivatam. The Virat Purusha is indeed Adidaiva, the supreme being. Then Adhiyajna Katham. What is the nature of Adhiyajna? Who is Adhiyajna? Then he says Adhiyajna Ahameva. That to which is addressed as Adhiyajna, I am that. So Bhagavan or Ishvara, I am that. So we know that Yajna refers to an object of worship. When the Yajna refers to worship. So when there is worship, there has to be an object of worship. There are different kinds of yajnas in the Veda rituals. We also saw in the fourth chapter the different yajnas. So we can offer a yajna to Indra or Varuna or Soma, Agni. So many deities are there. But ultimately, when we have to offer a yajna to Brahman, then we have to offer the yajna itself. Right? When we offer to different people, we offer what they like. When we offer to Brahman, we offer the yajna itself. And ultimately, whatever devata we are propitiating, ultimately the fruit of it, the result is that it leads to worshipping of Brahman. Then kaha atra dehe asmin, who resides in this body? Ahameva atra dehe. I am the one inside, residing in the body. Here, D.V. Gundappa takes the opportunity to introduce the concept of Pancha Kosha, which is not there in the Bhagavad Gita. Pancha Kosha is one of the ideas which are not been discussed in the Bhagavad Gita. Because, like I have always mentioned earlier, it is a discussion and it's not a uh, textbook. So therefore, it all the topics need not be covered. Whatever is relevant for that particular discussion comes to play. So the Panchakosha, which is an important concept that has been explained in great detail in the Taittiriya Upanishad, which is one of the 10 principal Upanishads, talks about five koshas, five sheets. Okay, so almost if you remember, like the Russian doll, there is one doll in then that there's another one over that, and then one over that, and so forth. So when you keep opening it, you keep getting smaller and smaller ones. So from outside, so you think of it as a like a sphere. You remove the outer shell, you have something inside. You remove that, you have some core inside. You remove the core, there's even more fundamental point inside, and so forth. So these are the different layers. Or he also gives an example of people in some of the cold countries. They wear multiple layers of clothing. So they'll have a vest, and then they'll have a shirt, and they'll have a coat like a waistcoat, and then some other normal coat, and then an overcoat. Like this, you have multiple layers of clothing when it's very cold, right? So similarly, we have the five sheets or five layers. The first layer is called Annamaya Kosha, where Anna refers to anything to do with food. Basic thing is the element of food. So, which is the, in our body, the flesh and the bones and the skin, and all these things. First thing is we need food for survival. So, whatever food we take, we become the food we eat, right? Part of the food is used for bodybuilding. So that is the Annamaya Kosha. Then what happens to the food that we eat apart from the ones that are building the body? It generates energy, right? Excuse me, generates energy. So that is the Pranamaya Kosha, which generates energy. So from the food, we get energy that helps us breathe and keeps the cells alive and so forth. Once we have energy, once we are fulfilled, then all the mental activity begins. So we are thinking, we are using our mind for various things. That is the manomaya kosha. So annamaya kosha is with regard to food, pranamaya kosha with regard to breath or energy, manomaya kosha is at the level of thought. So because our food is taken care, because we have energy, we are able to think and exercise our mind. This consists of all the experiences of pleasure and pain, observing the world, and so on. Then the next one is called Vijnanamaya Kosha, which is comprising the buddhi, the decision making abilities, the experiential wisdom, the collected knowledge from the past, and applying it wisely in different situations. That is the fourth layer. The fifth, the core, is Anandamaya Kosha, which comprises bliss. When we are thinking, when we are applying the mind, when we are using our experiential wisdom and leading a life which is, giving us satisfaction, it will lead us to this layer of bliss, right? So this we have this, when you say our body and our body mind complex, we have all these elements in it. And finally, Arjuna asks, Prayana Kale cha katham gyeya asi. How is a man or a woman, how is a person, how should they know you at the time of their death? How should they meditate upon you? What is the means to know your highest form? And he says, Antakale cha mameva smaran madbhavam yati. So in those last moments, just meditate upon me in any form. Just think about the Supreme, and you will know the real nature. You will attain that highest state. Like we saw earlier, that the manner in which you have led your life will also be seen in the last moments. The state of mind that exists at the end of our life is the is a reflection of the life we have led. If you have led a life of purity, a life where we are happy and peaceful and trying to help other people, even in the last days we will be thinking on those lines. So that's why he says that yam yam vapi smaran bhavam, right? You remember the sixth shloka of this chapter. So whichever form that one meditates on the Supreme, and when they discard this body, they attain that same form that they are meditating upon. Now we come to the idea of dhyana. So we have seen in the eighth chapter that there is a idea of dhyana and meditating on omkara. Now in the ninth verse, he talks about uh, two traits of the Supreme Being, which is very interesting. Sarvasya dhataram achintya rupam aditya varnam tamasah parasta. So the Brahman is rules over everything and protects everyone and bright like the sun. So the characteristics of Brahman have been discussed elsewhere as well. And when we do dhyana, we try to use the word, the single syllable Om, which represents the Brahman. Now, the idea is that basically we can, when we start off with, when we are meditating or trying to worship or anything, we can use a certain deity, a physical form. It's easy for us to relate to that. You have a particular vigraha of a deity or an image, an icon of some kind. It is much easier when we think of a person, whether it's Rama or Krishna or Saraswati or Devi, um, uh, Ganapati or Skanda, whoever. When we think of a deity, it is easier for us to try to bring those characteristics into our mind. But as we go further and further in the meditative path, then we use a single syllable Om, which denotes Brahman, and which helps focus all the energy towards what we are trying to understand, which is ourselves. Then he talks about some of the traits of a yogi, how a person who is meditating will not allow his mind to wander, constantly contemplates about the Brahman, and so on. Then comes the tricky shlokas. From verse 16 onwards, we have some other tricky shlokas. Excuse me. So he says all the lokas, all the worlds until that of Brahma have a return. So if you go to any of those lokas, you spend some time there and then you come back. But when you reach the highest domain, highest state, you never return. Because we have seen that every stage, every loka, there is a beginning and there is an end. It is all destructible because Brahma also has a span of 100 Brahma years, after which he also dies and he is again reborn. So, therefore, all these lokas are subject to creation, sustenance, and destruction. It is only the supreme domain which is beyond all these things. So, uh, it is the Parabrahma which remains beyond Vyakta and Avyakta, which is untouched by any of the cosmic cycles. Okay, and once somebody reaches that highest level, there is no return. Now comes to the two verses 8, 24, and 25, which is very, very confusing, and there are a lot of possibilities, a lot of ways to interpret it, and so on. But before that, in 8:23, he says that when a yogi dies, there are two possibilities for him. And I will tell you what are these two possibilities. In the 24th and the 25th, we have to take this two verses in conjunction together as a pair, because in one he is talking about path A and the other one is talking about path B. So here, uh, again, there's a big discussion I had, and with my co-author. One way of looking at this in 8:24 and 25. So if you look at the verses, Agnir Jyoti Raha Shuklaha is what it says in the 24th, and Dhumo Ratris Tatha Krishna is what is said in 25th, the first line of these two verses. Now, Agni, Jyoti, Aha, Shukla, and Shanmasa Uttarayanam. So, one way of looking at it is like fire, light, daytime, brightness. Shukla is translated just as brightness, and represent the 6 months of Uttarayana. Dhumo Ratris Tatha Krishna Shanmasa Dakshinayanam. So, smoke, night, and darkness, these are representing Dakshinayana, the 6 months of Dakshinayana. The characteristics of the path of Uttarayana are fire, light, day, brightness, and the half of the year. The characteristics of the Dakshina, the path of Dakshinayana, are smoke, night, darkness, and the 6 months of year, which are Dakshinayana. This is one way of looking at it, which is fine. We can also look at it as uh, you know um, we consider Shukla and Krishna as Shukla Paksha and Krishna Paksha. That is one way of looking at it, because the Shukla Paksha is supposed to be a daytime for the ancestors. The Krishna Paksha is supposed to be daytime for the nighttime for the ancestors. The Uttarayana is considered to be a 1 day for the Devas, and the Dakshinayana is considered to be one night of the Devas. So, like this, every month, so a human month is equal to a day for the ancestors. A human year is a day for the devas. And another thing he was mentioning when we were discussing yesterday is that the day of Brahma spans 4.32 billion years. The night of Brahma spans 4.32 billion years. So if you add these two together, one day and night of Brahma is 8.64 billion years. And it is coincidental that there are 86,400 seconds in a day. So it's by the factor of so much that we have 1 day of Brahma. Perhaps a coincidence, but it's a very interesting coincidence. So therefore, the Uttarayana symbolizes brightness, Dakshinayana symbolizes darkness. So beyond that, I don't think we should worry too much about it, because he says Shukla Krishne Gati Hyete Jagatas Shashvate Mate. So there have always been two paths historically in the world. One is the path of brightness, that of wisdom, and the other is the path of darkness or ignorance. So generally, there is uh, this idea of dark and bright that symbolizes these two ideas. Now, some commentators, some thinkers, they say that the death during Uttarayana is called the Devayana, and the death during um Dakshinayana is called Pitrayana. So, therefore, Devayana one achieves Brahman. Through Pitrayana, one goes through multiple births, gains Punya again, and continues in the cycle of birth, and finally goes to Devayana. So, the concept of Pitrayana here is that, like we saw earlier, also one who falls short of perfection in yoga is born again and lives in a family that is already having samskara and so forth. Pitriyana is a method of gradually improving the life. This is another way of interpreting it. Like I said, given the what do you say, the confusions and um, mysticism surrounding these two verses, we felt that it makes more sense to say that, to explain this as a There are some yogis who attain liberation and go to the state of Brahman. There are some yogis who are reborn so that they can come back and guide people around them. So it's just an explanation, like I said, that based on our understanding of these verses. But it is, since it is not very clear and it's a metaphorical usage, there's always a possibility for interpretations either way. But like I said, this is a secondary thing. There is no uh, uh, great importance. One need not think that if somebody died in Dakshinayana, it's the end of the whole thing, because the basic idea really is that we have to try and improve our quality of life. Like in every other instance, these are just certain methodology to offer solace to people, is to offer certain guidelines to people, rather than for it to be taken literally. This is important to realize, like I said earlier also, right? Whether swarga, naraka, or any of the religious practices, these are all beliefs that can help people improve their quality of life. So if the belief is, even though it's a belief at the state of Adi Daiva, if you remember, not Adi Bhuta or Adhyatma, if it is in the level of Adi Daiva, it can help people lead better quality of life. It can contribute to sustenance of the society. There's nothing wrong with that. And trying to take Adhidaiva and explaining it in the level of Adhibhuta is very futile. Now there are so many beliefs that are there. Now if you try to go into the scientific facts, and now there's a fad, especially in the last maybe 20 years, a scientific basis for everything, starting from keeping a tilaka to having whatever, wearing a certain kind of clothing. It is just a convention. So there's no point in trying to find scientific basis for things which are driven by emotion and belief. Whereas when there are certain things which are to do with science, there's no point in bringing in belief. Now, certain, if you have a certain medication for a disease, your doctor prescribes that, you go and take that medication if you want to sustain yourself. There's no point in looking at that bottle of medicine, whatever is there. Is it the right muhurta for me to take my pill? No. If you look at the astronomical calculation and things like that, it is whether you have it at time A or time B, it's going to have the same efficacy, because it is dealing with body, it's dealing with the adhibhuta. When it comes to belief, it is a different realm. There is no problem in having belief, but there is no need to explain belief using adhibhuta. And once it has come to the uh, truth of your experience, that which is adhyatma, then there is no need for you to explain anything, because it is an experience for you. It's a value in your case. So, therefore, it's important for us to realize that these different levels of truths are there. And the core ideas of our tradition are always about adhyatma, about realizing the value, rather than some of the peripheral things, which are also there, no doubt. But we must never forget that they are peripheral. Okay, there was a comment from someone. Ashokji. Okay. It asked for putting up the time cycle, which I will, yeah, I can share that also on the group. Not a problem. And there was a message on the chat. Just one second. Okay, so Nagendra Prasad ji has a comment about Vedas being categorized into Karma Kanda and Jnana Kanda. So, like I said, you can say, oh, people who followed Jnana Kanda will attain Brahman and will go on this path, Uttarayana. Those who did Karma Kanda will go on the path to Dakshinayana and so forth. But again, like I said, this is metaphorical, and it can be interpreted in many ways. But what is really important for us to realize is that um, we must try to lead a high quality of life, trying to be constantly connected with the Supreme Being. And even in the last moment, we are able to sustain that uh, goodness and nobility and so forth. So that's really what we need to take out of this chapter. Okay, so let's get started with the uh, next chapter. But then I was reminded yesterday, my mother told me, hey, you didn't repeat the last shloka. So, well, let's do the last shloka once, and then we will go to the ninth chapter. So, who's going to be reciting today? Have they been made the co-host?
Sorry, Aparna ji. Aparna ji will be reciting. She's co-host.
Okay, so can we do the last verse of the eighth chapter and then move on to the ninth? Vedeshu yajneshu tapassu chaiva
वेदेषु यज्ञेषु तपस्सु चैव
daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtam
दानेषु यत् फलं प्रदिष्टम्
atyeti tat sarvamidam viditva
अत्तेति तत्सर्वमिदं विदित्वा
yogi param sthanam upaiti chadyam.
योगी परं स्थानमुपैति चाद्यम्.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the end of the eighth chapter. We come to the ninth chapter. Now the ninth chapter is takes on slightly a different tone and tenor, which is also why I think in his Jivana Dharma Yoga, D.V. Gundappa calls the eighth chapter as a bridge chapter between the previous ones and the later ones. So with the ninth and then following this, the 10th and 11th, they have a certain kind of new force and direction. Then after that kind of climax at the 11th chapter, then the 12th onwards, it's a very sober and very penetrating set of chapters, 12, 13. And then we have the 14th chapter, we have the Triguna concept being discussed in greater detail, so on. So here, the ninth chapter also, without any question from Arjuna, Krishna starts, Sri Bhagavan Vacha, idam tu te guhyatamam pravaksham jnanam vijnana sahitam yad jnatva mokshase shubhat. So knowing this, you will go away from all things which are inauspicious. So what is this? Arjuna, you value my words, so I will reveal to you the best of secrets. What is the best of secrets? It is practical knowledge guided by wisdom. Once you know this, you will be free from all sorrow. Yat gyatva, knowing which, ashubhat mokshase, you will be free from all inauspiciousness, all sorrow. That 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 it should be understood. Idam guhyatamam, the best of secrets, the most mysterious, the best of secrets. Vijnana sahitam jnanam. So it is jnanam, knowledge, along with experiential wisdom. Vijnana sahitam. Sahitam is with. To anusuyave te pravakshami. So indeed, it will, because you are so interested to listen to me, because you are so free from all jealousy, free from all malice, and so on. You are interested to know what I'm saying. Therefore, I will reveal to you the best of secrets, which is practical knowledge guided by wisdom. Sri Bhagavan Vacha.
श्री भगवानुवाच
Idam tu te guhyatamam
इदं तु ते गुह्यतमं
pravaksham yanusuyave
प्रवक्ष्याम्यनसूयवे
jnanam vijnana sahitam
ज्ञानं विज्ञानसहितं
yajñatva mokshase shubhat.
यज्ञात्वा मोक्षसे शुभात्.
Then he says, Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam Pavitramidam Uttamam Pratyakshaavagamam Dharmyam Susukham Kartum Avyayam. So this is the deepest of all mysteries. It is the greatest of all studies and branches of knowledge. It is the purest of the pure and the best of the best. It follows all the rules of dharma. It adheres to dharma. It is easy to practice and one can experience it directly. So, idam Raja Vidya, Raja Guhyam. So, Raja Vidya, it is the greatest of all knowledge. And Raja Guhyam, it is the greatest, deepest of all mysteries. Pavitram, Uttamam. So, it is Pavitram, pure, Uttamam, which is the best. And Pratyakshavagam. So, it is something which it can be realized by Pratyaksha, by practical experience, immediate perception, immediate experience. So, Pratyakshaavagamam dharmyam. So, it is adhering to dharma, adhering to the rules of dharma. Kartum susukham avyayam. So, kartum susukham, it is easy to practice and it is indestructible. It is great. It is something which will never go away, will never get destroyed. Avyaya, right? Now, we know that dharma is the principle that sustains the world, which is the principle of sustainability. So, there are a lot of traits he's talking about this greatest of knowledge. So one is it is the deepest of mysteries, it is the greatest of knowledge of all studies. It is pure, it is supreme, superior, it adheres to dharma, it is easy to practice, and one can experience it directly. So, all the uh, very, very noble traits, all the check boxes are ticked. So, Raja Vidya, Raja Guhyam,
Raja Vidya, Raja Guhyam,
Pavitram Idam Uttamam,
Pavitramidam Uttamam,
Pratyakshaavagamam Dharmyam,
Pratyakshaavagamam Dharmyam,
Susukham Kartum Avyayam.
Susukham Kartum Avyayam.
Then he says, Ashraddha Dhanaha Purusha Dharmasyasya Parantapa Aprapya Mam Nivartante Mrityu Samsara Vartmani. So those who reject dharma fail to attain the highest state, fail to attain the supreme. They are born again and again in this endless cycle of birth and death, birth and rebirth. So Parantapa, scorcher of foes, reference to Arjuna. Asya dharmasya ashraddhadanaha purushaha. So people who don't have faith in this dharma, people who don't adhere to this dharma, people who reject dharma, ashraddhadanaha purushaha, people, mam aprapya, they don't attain me, they don't attain the highest level. Mrityu samsara vartmani nivartante. So they keep traversing this path of mrityu samsara. That is, this birth, then your life and death, then again reborn, and this cycle. They're going round and round this cyclical path. They don't realize the highest thing because they reject dharma. So, ashraddha dhanaha purusha
Ashraddhadhanaha Purusha,
dharmasyasya parantapa
Dharmasyasya Parantapa,
aprapya mam nivartante
Aprapya Mam Nivartante,
mrityu samsara vartmani.
Mrityu Samsara Vartmani.
Then next he says, Maya tatamidam sarvam jagad avyakta murtina matsthani sarva bhutani na chaham teshvavasthitaha. So I pervade the entire universe, but I am invisible. All beings depend on me, but I don't depend on them. So here he says, Avyakta Murtina. So although I am Avyakta, although I am, not visible or not having a form, not manifest Avyakta. So Avyakta Murtina, although I am Avyakta, that I'm not visible. Avyaktamurtina cha maya idam sarvam jagat tatam. Although I'm unmanifest, I pervade this entire universe. Sarva bhutani matsthani. All beings depend on me. Aham teshu na avasthitaha. But I do not depend on them. Maya tatamidam sarvam.
Maya tatamidam sarvam
Jagad avyakta murtina.
jagadavyakta murtina
Matsthani sarva bhutani.
matsthani sarvabhutani
Na chaham teshvavasthitaha.
na chaham teshvavasthitaha.
Yeah. Then he says, Nacha matsthani bhutani pashyame yogam aishwaram bhuta bhrinna cha bhutasto mamatma bhuta bhavanaha. Although I bring forth and sustain all beings, I am not dependent on them. And in a way, even they don't depend on me. Behold the grandeur of my yoga, Arjuna. So he says, Bhutani matsthitani na. So if you think about it, I'm not dependent on uh, bhuta. So so here what he has done, bhuta bhrit cha bhuta bhavanaha chetapi cha mama atma bhutastha na aishwaryam me yogam pashya. Okay, he's given it slightly differently, but anyway, that's fine. So he says Aishwaryam me yoga pashya, which is look at this grandeur of my yoga. Look at the the brilliance or greatness of my yoga. Bhuta bhrid cha bhuta bhavanaha cha mama atma bhutastaha na bhutani matsthani na vastutaha. I am not, although so bhuta bhrit cha bhuta bhavanaha chet mama atma bhutastha naha. Although I am the one who is bringing forth and sustaining all these beings, I am not dependent on them. And in a way, bhutani matsthani na. Even they don't depend on me. Now, he said earlier that I pervade the entire universe and all beings depend on me and I don't depend on them. So, this is the indispensable aspect of dependency, right? So, there is, a certain dependence that all beings have on the Supreme Being, on the Paramatma, for basic sustenance. Just like how, when we are leading our life, we had depend on the world around us for just getting the air that we breathe, getting food, and so on. But here in this verse, he said, in a way, even they don't depend on me. So this refers to the dispensable part of it. So when we say, like, that we are independent, what we mean is at one level, it's impossible to be independent because of the basic dependencies. But once that is crossed, there is a possibility of being independent. So here he talks about one following the laws of nature and the bindings which we have as human beings. But then he also talks about the possibility of free will, of our exercising what we want to do. So there is both dependence and independence. Okay. Nacha mat sthani bhutani
Na cha matsthani bhutani
pashya me yogam aishwaram
pashya me yogam aishwaram
bhuta bhrinna cha bhutastho
bhuta bhrunna cha bhutastho
mamatma bhuta bhavanaha.
mamatma bhuta bhavanaha.
This is yathakasha stito nityam vayuhu sarvatrago mahan tatha sarvani bhutani matsthani ityupadharaya. So just like the mighty wind arises in space and moves freely in all direction, yet it is always confined to the space. So in the same way, all creatures arise from me, yet they always remain within me. A very nice imagery. Yatha sarvatra gaha. So just like all traversing, sarvatra gaha, all traversing, mahan vayuhu, the great wind that travels everywhere, nityam akashastitaha, but it is always eternally situated in space. Tatha matsthani sarvani bhutani iti upadharaya. So similarly, all the creatures are established in the Supreme, but they are free to, but they remain within me. So they are born and they are moving about, but they remain within this the framework of Brahman. Just like how the wind arises in the space, it moves about in all direction. It has that freedom, but ultimately it remains inside. It is confined to the space. So similarly, Brahman being the all-pervasive, everything moves about freely, but at the end of the day, still confined to the larger framework of Brahman, which is like a superset. Yathakasha sthito nityam,
यथाकाशस्थितो नित्यं
vayuh sarvatrago mahan,
वायुः सर्वत्र गोमहान्
tatha sarvani bhutani,
तथा सर्वाणि भूतानि
matsthani tyupadharaya.
मत्स्थानित्युपधारय.
Then he says, Sarvabhut. Oh, sorry, got to. Is that the right verse? Yeah. Sarvabhutani kaunteya prakritim yanti mamikam kalpakshaya punastani kalpado visirjamyaham. So, at the end of a cosmic day, that is the day of Brahma, all beings return to my unmanifest state. Again, I bring them forth at the beginning of the next cosmic day. Kaunteya, kalpakshaye, at the end of a kalpa, at the end of a cosmic cycle, sarva bhutani mamikam prakritim yanti. They return to my state, which is the unmanifest state. Kalpadav, at the beginning of the new kalpa, at the beginning of the new cosmic cycle, Tani aham punaha visrajami. So again, I create them, I bring them forth again, the beginning of the next cosmic day. So 4.32 billion years is a cosmic day. Then we have 4.32 billion years, which is the night of Brahma, which is there's nothing happening there. Then again, there is the next day, which is a new kalpa. So Sarva Bhutani Kaunteya
सर्वभूतानि कौन्तेय
Prakritim Yanti Mamikam
प्रकृतिं यान्ति मामिकां
Kalpakshaye Punastani
कल्पक्षये पुनस्तानि
Kalpado Visrajamyaham.
कल्पादौ विसृजाम्यहम्.
Prakritim Swam Avashtabhya Visrajami Punah Punah Bhutagrama Mimam Kritsnam Avasham Prakriter Vashat. So again and again, controlling my own nature, I bring forth these myriads of beings and subject them to the laws of nature. So Swam Prakritim Avashtabhya Prakritehe Vashat Imam Avasham Kritsnam Bhutagramam Punah Punah Visarjami. So Swam Prakritim Avashtabhya. So having kind of controlled my own prakriti, having restrained my own nature. So swam prakritim avashtabhya, prakritehe vashat, subjecting them to the laws of prakriti, the laws of nature. Imam avasham kritsnam bhutagramam, so this entire group of beings. Punah punah visajami. So I bring forth again and again. I create these various beings. So Prakritim Swam Avashtabhya
प्रकृतिं स्वाम् अवष्टभ्य
Visrijami Punah Punaha
विसृजामि पुनः पुनः
Bhutagramamimam kritsnam
Bhutagramamimam kritsnam
avasham prakriter vashat.
avasham prakruter vashat.
Nachamam tani karmani nibadnanti dhananjaya udasinavadasinam asaktam teshu karmasu. So these actions do not bind me, Dhananjaya, because I remain unconcerned and unattached. So Dhananjaya, teshu karmasu asaktam. So I am not uh, concerned about these actions. Asakta, or I'm not attached to these actions. Right? So I'm not uh, driven by this. It's not like, I'm not obsessed by these actions. So udasinavat. So udasinavat asinam. So basically what he's saying is I'm detached, I'm unconcerned, and yet I'm doing the action. Tani karmani na nibadnanti. Those actions do not bind me because I am acting in the spirit of karma yoga. Basically, I am whatever creation I am doing. He's saying that it's all happening in the spirit of karma yoga. So therefore, I remain unconcerned, unattached, and unbound by these actions. I'm just doing it because it is my duty. So nacha mam tani karmani
Nachamam tani karmani
nibadnanti dhananjaya
nibadhnanti dhananjaya
udasinavadasinam
udasinama udasinamavadasinam
Udasinavat asinam. So udasinavad asinam. Asaktam teshu karmasu.
asaktam teshu karmasu.
Yeah. Mayadhyakshena prakritihi suyate sacharacharam hetunanena kaunteya jagat viparivartate. So, under my supervision, nature brings forth all beings, animate and inanimate, and sets the universe in motion. Kaunteya, Adhyakshena Maya, under my supervision, under my, um, Adhyaksha is kind of a leader or president or the manager, supervisor. So, under my supervision, Adhyakshena Maya, Sacharacharam, along with the inanimate and animate. So, moving and not moving. So, living, non living things. All these things, Prakriti hi suyate. So, Prakriti brings forth all these beings. Anena hetuna jagat viparivartate. Excuse me. And by that, it sets the universe in motion. As a result of that, it sets the universe in motion. Pretty straightforward verses. Mayadhyakshena prakritihi
Mayadhyakshena prakritihi
suyate sacharacharam
सूयते सचराचरम्
hetunanena kaunteya
हेतुनानेन कौन्तेय
jagad viparivartate.
जगद्विपरिवर्तते.
Then it says, avajananti mam moodhaha manushim tanumashritam param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. So when I appear in human form, the foolish people disregard me, for they don't recognize my higher state as a great lord of beings. They fail to look beyond the physical appearances, basically. So, mama param bhavam ajanantah moodaha manushim tanum ashritam bhuta maheshwaram mam avajananti. So, mama param bhavam. They don't realize my higher state. Ajanantah moodaha manushim tanum ashritam. So when I take a human form, manushim tanum ashritam, then the foolish people, the moodaha, they don't realize that when I take this human form, they don't realize that I have got the higher state. They don't recognize Bhuta Maheshwaram Mam. They don't realize that I'm the Lord of all beings. Avajananti, they do not know, do not recognize. So avajananti mam moodaha manushim tanum ashritam param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwar. So sorry, one by one. So avajananti mam moodaha.
अवजानन्ति मां मूढाः
Sorry, mam moodha, because that will low power.
मां
Manushim tanum ashritam
मानुषीं तनुमाश्रितं
param bhavam ajananto
परं भावम् अजानन्तो
mama bhuta maheshwaram.
मम भूत महेश्वरम्.
Then he says, Moghasha Mogha Karmano Mogha Jnana Vichetasaha Rakshasi Masurim Chaiva Prakritim Mohinim Shritaha. So they lack insight and they are utterly confused with unreal hopes, trivial knowledge, and insignificant deeds. They resort to wicked ways. So moghashaha. So mogha basically means futile or useless, ineffective. It is. So moghasha is like unreal hopes. Mogha karmana. Mogha karmana refers to futile or useless, insignificant deeds. Mogha jnanaha. It's trivial knowledge. And vichetasaha, kind of not of good temperament, wicked people. Rakshasim, Asurim cha, Mohinim, Prakritim eva shritaha. So they are like completely confused. They lack insight and they have these wicked tendencies. So when somebody is not able to recognize the highest form, when somebody is not able to recognize the supreme being. Basically, what happens is they're looking only at a very material and selfish state of things. They're not looking at the bigger picture. That's what he's trying to say. So they lack insight, they are confused, they don't know what is right and wrong. They, whether it's their hopes, their thoughts, their knowledge, their actions, everything is very insignificant and in fact even demonic. Sometimes they resort to the demonic paths. So it basically refers to people who don't see the higher level things in life. So moghasha mogha karmano
मोघाशा मोघकर्माणो
mogha jnana vichetasaha
मोघज्ञाना विचेतसः
rakshasi masurim chaiva
राक्षसीमासुरीं चैव
prakritim mohinim shritaha.
प्रकृतिं मोहिनीं श्रिताः.
Yeah, thank you so much for presiding today. So basically, the ninth chapter has a lot of emphasis on the devotion aspect of things, where the focus is on realizing the supreme being, supreme supremacy of the Brahman. In this case, of course, Sri Krishna, but in general, that of the Brahman. Now, what is important is that from each of these chapters, whatever we are reading, we are to try and pick up something that is relevant for us, that makes sense to us, and keep aside things that are beyond our understanding or something that doesn't appeal to us at that moment. Instead of rejecting it, we keep it aside and look at what we can take from it. So, like in the case of the eighth chapter, we saw that what real takeaway is that we want to lead a good quality of life. If we want to adhere to dharma, we want to spend some time on meditation and constantly cultivate the presence of Supreme rather than do the calculation of whether, Uttarayana, Dakshinayana, when this person died, what is their path, whether they're reborn here. Those are the secondary details which we can keep aside for now, but focus on what we can actually implement. So that will be a good way to take from the Gita rather than try to focus on everything. Then you will get confused. So you take whatever is relevant to you and then go forward. So thank you so much. We'll meet again tomorrow. Om Tat Sat. Namaste.
Thank you, Hariji.